Bem-vindos to one more episode of the Type Theory for All podcast. As always, this is your host, Pedro Abreu, this time talking directly from Brazil, the dreamland of beautiful sighted people. In this episode, we will talk about the Sigplan, probably the most important organization in our field of programming languages. What is Sigplan? What exactly does it do? How is it organized? How are things published? To answer this and many other questions, we will talk with Jens Palsberg, who is the past chair of the Sigplan. Jens is a professor at UCLA. And also, we will talk with Jonathan Aldrich, who is a member of the ACM publication board. Jonathan is a professor at Carnegie Mellon. But before we get into the conversation, I would like to ask you guys to consider supporting the show. If you're liking the show, go to our website, typetheoryforall.com, and you will see a link to Ko-Fi. Any donations will be greatly appreciated to keep running the show. Thank you so much. So, without further ado, let's get into it. We have here today Jonathan Aldrich and Jens Palsberg. Thank you so much for being here, you two.
Thanks for inviting us.
Yes, thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Where should we start this? Because, so I have a plan to have a better understanding of how everything comes together in order for us as a group of researchers, of scientists, to publish our work and how all this organizes together. And I know that most of our conferences are under the Sigplan. That's why you two are here. We're going to be talking about that. But the Sigplan itself is part of this bigger organization, the ACM, right? So I think a good place to start is to have a better understanding of what is the ACM and what the role does it play in our field.
So ACM is a society. It's most of all a society of educators and researchers and computing professionals. And it's indeed the largest society of its kind, sort of an educational and scientific society. And so the goal of ACM is to create dialogue, to share, and of course to work on the challenges in computing.
How is it organized internally?
Of course, a lot of ACM is volunteers. ACM has 100,000 members. A lot of them volunteer for one thing or the other. There are committees and there are councils, there are special interest groups, and they do lots of things. And then the ACM does have a headquarters with 70 staff in New York City. And so the staff is there then to make all those members have a good time and do good things.
Oh, wow. Sounds like a very big organization that is somehow an umbrella to organize everything going on in the field of computer science. Is that a fair idea?
I think so. The ACM has its hands in just about everything going on in computing. And most likely any topic in computing, there'll be a special interest group that's focusing on that. Any problem that's facing society, there's most likely a council or a committee that's interested in finding out how to address it.
Very interesting. And now you mentioned special interest groups. What are those?
The special interest groups are already like a third of the 100,000 members. We have, of course, Sigplan, the special interest group on programming languages. We have another special interest group on software engineering, and then another 36 after that. And so the idea is that that's where people come together around more specific topics, technical topics. And so a lot of what ACM does that has to do with, say, conference proceedings or sometimes journals connected to conferences, that goes through the special interest groups.
So, wow, 36, that's a lot. That's much more than I would expect. Like computer science is a lot bigger than I would think. But so these special interest groups, they're self-managing. They all have their own organization and they do their own thing with their own money. Let's put it that way, with their own people. How much does the ACM has a role inside what the CIGs are doing?
Yeah, the special interest groups are exactly like you said. They self-organize, they self-run, and the headquarters, one of their finest functions is to support the special interest groups in what they want to do. So, for example, if the Sigplan wants to organize a conference, they may need a hotel, and then the headquarters may help them find a hotel that matches the price that they want to pay. Or there may be something coming up where they want to start a new award, and then headquarters will help get the award text in order and make it look like so that it is indeed an award that's like the other awards that ACM already has, and sort of uses some of the same language and satisfies all the good criteria about diversity and inclusion and so on. And so that's where the headquarters is helpful. And but the SIGs, otherwise, they will have their own executive committee. It will have its own money, and what they do is that they pay, we could call it a tax or an overhead to ACM in return for getting those services. So
Right.
from the headquarters.
Yeah, that sounds fair because they're providing quite some service for you for the SIGs. It sounds like similar to what a department does in a university, right? And the department is providing all these services and they're organizing things and they're making sure that everything can run smoothly. So the ACM is this bigger umbrella where it's making sure that the SIGs are the ones that are actually doing the work. It seems to me, right?
Yeah, very well said.
That's very interesting. Now, okay, so let's focus a little more on the Sigplan then. What exactly is the Sigplan? What does the Sigplan does?
So Sigplan is the special interest group on programming languages. And so it's all things programming languages, the concepts and the tools and the theory and the implementation and the practice, the use of languages and everything in between. And so the Sigplan members are the people who are interested in some of that or all of that or whatever it may be. And so what Sigplan then does is, well, very importantly, it organizes conferences. So we have well over 10 conferences every year organized by Sigplan. And then we give awards. We have 10 different awards that we give out every year for both software tools, for young researchers, for established researchers, for best papers, awards of all kinds. And so this is one way that we celebrate excellence. We want to always celebrate all the excellence that's going on in our community. And then much more current, we have a blog where the blog editors see to that news are coming out. Sometimes those news are interviews. Sometimes they are some exciting paper that was published recently that may be a bit difficult to read from end to end, but then the blog editors will see to that a short version that's readable by everybody will come out.
I just wrote a blog post on how we organized Splash. Coming back from the pandemic, Splash was the first of the major Sigplan conferences to go back to in-person operations, but we also ran it as a hybrid conference. So we talked in the blog about our experience with that.
It was that one in Chicago, right?
That was in Chicago last November. Yes,
it was lovely. It was so good to go to be back in person and just see people and to actually talk. Like not just see this virtual face that we have all the time in front of us.
It really was wonderful to be back, but it was also fun that we could hold it and have people participate, even though some people from Europe and other parts of the world weren't able to come into the U.S. at that time. We were able to host people, giving talks remotely, participating in hallway conversations through a video link to the hallway, participating in Ask Me Anythings and some of our social events. So it was an experiment, with some successes and some lessons learned. But yes, very fun to be back.
That was great. Yeah, hold that thought a little bit. We're gonna. I want to come back to this in a bit. Talk more about the conferences and this hybrid style. Definitely, there are some things that I want to go through over there. Before we get to it, so we're talking about the organization of the Sigplan. I was curious. So everything that happens under the ACM and the Sigplan, everything is volunteered. everything. Nobody is getting much out of this. Why do you guys do this then? I mean, what is going on? You know.
Well, first of all, I get to know you people, right? So that's a benefit. Um, I think what I learned over time is that by volunteering for Sigplan, I get to know people who really love the field and like to see good things happen in the field, and those people are just fun to work with. We can make things happen together. That's the reward.
I would agree with that, and I think there's also an aspect of giving back.
Right.
We've all those of us who are in the community, especially the research community, have all been to Sigplan conferences. We've published papers. We know we can see how much work has gone into the feedback that we get from reviewers, and how much work goes into conference organizations. And that only happens because people step up and volunteer, and so when you're in a position to do it, then it's nice to have that chance to give back to the community, and it is fun. It's nice to see other people at the conferences. It's nice to be there and see something that you had a small part in building. Making people happy to see each other, and helping promote knowledge in the field. So these are all good things.
Yeah, I definitely relate to that. There was some point that we have a group in Purdue as well called Purple, and during the pandemics, nobody was meeting and nobody was doing anything. Like I just want things to happen, right? And in order for things to happen, someone has to step up and organize, right? So it's just someone has to come over. So I just volunteered because of that. I just want things to happen, right? So I definitely see that happening. So Jens, you've been a Sigplan chair, I think last year. Is that correct? Could you
Yeah.
explain? Yeah, could you explain a little bit what is the role of a chair over there? What happens there? Like, and who are the people that you interact with? What are the other roles? Something along those lines.
Yeah. So first of all, the Sigplan has an executive committee of 11 people, and we're very good at continuity. We always have the past chair and the past vice chair on the executive committee, so that they can always say, "Well, we tried this a couple of years ago and it didn't work." That kind of thing. The the chair is really very much the chair of the executive committee. So it means sort of the more day-to-day stuff or week-to-week stuff that always comes to the chair. And then so the chair is there to get things done. And then all the bigger decisions, they go to the executive committee. And we have meetings twice a year. So typically at POPL and PLDI, so just like with about 6 months spread out. And really go over everything Sigplan does at those meetings. So the kind of things that come up sort of week to week are sort of usually sort of small things. So it could be that there's a problem with a conference, that that the conference is facing something big. Okay, the pandemic is coming. What do we do? And then that comes up to the Sigplan executive committee. But actually, the conferences have their own steering committees, and usually those steering committees are doing everything that it takes to organize the conferences. So that usually doesn't require the executive committee or the chair to help. But when there's a problem, then the chair has a very good function, which is that the chair is usually a little bit better connected to ACM headquarters, and then can
Right.
go and ask for help and readily get it. And then, of course, the chair has the job of seeing to that work gets done. So we do give out all these awards. And sometimes the award chair gets sick and doesn't get something done for a while. And then the Sigplan chair may need to either step in or like push or find a replacement or something. And just otherwise see to that things sort of keep going. So keep the trains running on time. So in that sense, the chair is sort of very much like a little chief executive who just sees to that day to day everything is working. But I think actually the steering committees of the conferences are very important in Sigplan. And so when we we already talked about Splash and then POPL and PLDI and ICFP, in particular those four, but also the steering committees of all the other Sigplan conferences. They do a great job of making the conferences happen every year, see to that they are held in different locations in the world, so that different people will be close to the conference every year, and see to that the conferences have high quality. And so in many ways, the Sigplan chair's job is to take a little bit of the credit that all those steering committees are generating by doing such a good job.
So the steering committee, they're kind of like doing their own thing. So yeah, I'm trying to keep in my mind the notion of how does the organizations come together. So there is this big umbrella of the ACM, and then there are the SIG, and then within the SIG, for each one of the conferences, there is the steering committee of the conference, where they are the ones that are actually making the conference to happen, and then they're talking with the committee, with the chair of the Sigplan, and chairs and the people that actually are there in the Sigplan much better connected, that can help with anything that comes up.
Yeah, very well said.
Okay. And how does the choice of the steering committee goes? Are chosen as well? They're also volunteered too.
They are also volunteers, and we have election. So every 3 years we have election, and so the chair is elected, and the vice chair is elected, and indeed all the other people on the executive committee are elected. And so all the 2,000 Sigplan members vote, and they get who they vote for.
Oh yeah, I think I voted like 2 years ago. Was it 2 years? Yeah, I think like last year, 2 years ago. I remember that. I remember something like that.
Yeah.
Although I have not much idea what I was voting for back then. I was still like a baby in our field. But okay, that's very nice. So okay, I have a better understanding now of how the Sigplan works and what they're doing, and how the conferences are coming together, and how these all people are involved. It sounds like a lot of work, and I'm very happy that we have you guys managing this. Everyone who is involved, that is amazing. Thank you so much. Now, then, and then I believe like the conferences itself is important on its own, because people are gonna gather there, are gonna meet there, are gonna talk and share, right? But behind that, we are also very interested in the publications that are going there. So the whole reason, in a sense, for the conference to exist is for the publications to happen, right? Let's talk about that a little bit. So each conference has their own set of publications. Is that correct?
That's right. Yes. Typically, each conference has a proceedings, which is the papers that are accepted to that conference, and of course, some conferences have multiple tracks where students can publish abstracts of posters that they're given. People developing research can publish in workshops of the conference, and of course, people who have more mature research can publish full papers and share that knowledge with the world. Through the paper and the publication. And, I think the nice thing about conferences is it combines an opportunity for the written publication with a chance to present the work. Really, it's the pairing of that kind of in-person experience and networking with the publication and dissemination of the scientific results.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree with that. Now, I have this. I don't know if you're going to be able to answer this question, but I've always been curious. How is a conference born? How do you guys sit down and decide, okay, we need a new conference about blah? Like, who decides that? What's going on behind the hood there?
Can I go all the way back to when ACM was founded? So
Please.
we're back in the 40s.
Yes, I love that.
There was a meeting at Columbia University in New York on September 15, 1947. We are very, very close to the 75 years anniversary, just a few days away from today. And indeed, we did have a big celebration in San Francisco of the 75 years earlier this year. And so why did they found ACM? And then we'll get back to why all these conferences. And the point is that to make progress, we need to bring people together. And back in the 40s, that was just when computers were first built, the first very, very early computers. And there was a lot of excitement. And so there started to be these meetings about computing. and people thought we need to organize this. And so this meeting at Columbia had a sort of a call for participation with a note in there that said that we're going to think about starting what became ACM. And that notice said the purpose of this organization would be to advance the science, development, construction, and application of the new machinery for computing, reasoning, and other handling of information. So think about that. Computers had just been invented, and people were already saying, we need to think about all this. We need to get together to make progress on this. And so ACM became this organization for hosting meetings, hosting workshops, hosting conferences, so we can all make progress and get to know each other. And that was the umbrella. And then you can say, okay, so how did we start Popl? Okay, so Popl was founded all the way back to the early 70s, and I was not there. But what people tell me is that programming languages as a field was starting to really take off. There were more and more languages, and it was clear that there was sort of common ideas and common interest, but everybody was doing it in a little bit different way. And it's like, we should get together and talk. And so this is where, I keep getting back to the tipping point, Malcolm Gladwell's book, that there are these people who are super connected and who love to just bring people together. So you get one of those, and before you know it, you'll have a new conference.
Indeed. And this process continues today. I think the origin stories of some of the other conferences in Sigplan and elsewhere happen where, there's a part of the community that is emerging and new things are happening. It happened to object-oriented programming in the 1980s. It was an idea that was explored originally in, with Simula and Smalltalk in the 1970s. But it had grown kind of beyond that and started to impact industry. But often when there's a new idea, there's no natural home for it, right? Or existing homes, they have their own standards, they have their ways of doing things. The new idea doesn't quite fit, right? And so people felt this about object-oriented programming. They were trying to publish their ideas and their papers, and they were getting resistance. And they said, we're going to form our own conference on objects. And so that was how UPSLA was born, which is now Splash, the conference I mentioned earlier. So, now objects are mainstream, and there's a lot of excitement around functional programming, which of course has its own conference in ICFP, but that's getting broader too. And but even today, I'm involved in a workshop on the human aspects of reasoning assistance, HATRA. That will be at Splash this fall. It's been held, I guess, twice before. So there's this new workshop at kind of the intersection of math and people, and mathematicians and psychologists don't talk all that much, but this is a little venue. It's only a workshop right now, but it's a little venue where those people can talk about how to make theorem proving easier for people. And so there's lots of workshops all over ACM like this, and the ones that are successful and kind of grow a new community, they might turn into major conferences, or maybe the community kind of grows and merges with an existing conference. That's okay too. But it's very organic. If you want to start something, you have an idea, you want to form a community, you can go and do that. You just put it in a proposal to one of our conferences to start a workshop. And if you have a good idea, it's likely it'll be accepted. You can go and make it happen. And if people come to it, it will grow.
Wow. Okay. I really like that answer. Went all the way back to the regions, and yep, sounds fair. Start as a workshop and work your way up. See how things go from there. I like that. I like that. Now, how because okay, so the institutions, especially here in the US, are very concerned about the quality of the conference, and then they assign the conference with different tiers, A1 or A2. I'm not very familiar with what exactly each tier is about. How does that work? How do you make sure that the conference itself is being held on a higher quality, or like maybe it's going to be a little more lenient in that side? How does the community works around those things?
So I think that's a decision that each community has to make for itself. And we have seen, changes over time and differences over time. I try not to emphasize these rankings too much. I think they are kind of a reflection of the reality, but they are not the reality itself. I think, quality is created by people. When you create that workshop, when you organize the next version of a conference, you put together a steering committee, a program committee. The program committee looks at the papers that are submitted and chooses them. And the quality of the conference comes from the quality of the papers that are submitted, the work that the reviewers do, and the quality and reputation of the reviewers in selecting papers that are ready for publication. And if you do a good job of that, if you can attract good material from authors, if you can review that material well and select and hone those papers to be papers that the community learns from and appreciates over time, then your conference will eventually become respected. And maybe someday later it'll get a good rating from one of these agencies. But I think that's not the right thing to focus on. I think the right thing to focus on is the work that we publish and making it high quality and ensuring the impact of that work.
I really like how you put things in regards of high quality. I think that's very important, and especially in the sense of being a community interested in honing high quality work, because I think there is a lot of how can I say, discussion, right, on how can we make the publication process more fair or more accessible. And I feel like within this discussion, we often forget about the aspect of quality, right? Which is the key point that we're trying to assure on this very heavy reviewing process. The peer reviewing process is making sure that things are up to a certain quality, right? I think the key point that kind of interests me is like this discussion of how much is too much. Once we are within the committee, the committee and the peer reviewing process, how much is too much to be like annoying to the authors of the paper, of like, oh no, you're being a little bit too flimsy on this particular aspect here, I cannot accept your paper. Like we all had this reviewer number 2 about this. Is this some sort of this sort of discussions? Is this something that happens within Sigplan, within the conferences? Like how can we make the publication process more fair overall?
So I want to sort of go back a little bit to the days when the entire evaluation of papers for conferences culminated with a PC meeting where people talk for a day and a half. And it sounds great. And in many ways, I love PC meetings. But the truth is that each paper that is discussed is only discussed for 10 minutes sometimes. And so it means that there's really a limit to how much one can get into all the discussion that is expressed in the reviews. And that started to change when we moved more and more to let's call it online program committee meetings, where it's no longer limited to a day, and where the reviewers of a paper can take the time over multiple weeks to discuss and really read what each other wrote. And so the effect of that, to me, is a huge unexpected benefit. It was not expected by me, which is that now people actually just want to be respected by the other reviewers. And so now let's forget about the authors for a moment. Now it's a matter of, if I'm one of the 3 reviewers of a paper, I want the other 2 people to think that I'm a reasonable person. And so it means that it is absolutely in my best interest to argue for my position, to give examples of what I'm talking about in my review, so that the other people will say, at least I don't agree with you, but at least you are arguing well for your position. And then we can still all respect each other. So these reviews have come from years ago, from being a place where you could say almost anything you wanted and get away with it, to that it's almost like a written exam, where at least there are two other reviewers who will think badly of you if you write something that reviewer two would have written.
I think that's a great point. And I would add to it that online reviewing has made it easier to fully incorporate external experts. So if you submit a paper, hopefully there's an expert on the program committee, because the program committee is often very diverse. But sometimes to get the expertise to evaluate your paper, we need to find someone who's not on the program committee but has that particular expertise that's just the right fit. And we can bring that person in, and they can be a full participant in the discussion. We did this before with in the era of PC meetings. But somehow, if you aren't present in the actual conversation in the PC meeting, sometimes your opinion isn't. It's hard to take it as equal to the others of people who are there. So I think we're able to more effectively incorporate in a completely equal way these viewpoints from outside the BC, where there's expertise, and that I think contributes to the quality as well.
That's something that I never thought of, because I'm already, I'm the younger generation now. And I'm already used to how things are so interconnected, and everything happens in the website, the hot crap. And I didn't even think about how things were before, how even worse it was. Like sitting for 10 minutes to talk about a paper. That doesn't make any sense to me. So it's nice to have things on their perspective, how they are evolving, right? And I think, well, for me at least, it's what we're doing is hard, right? Like all of this is in order to advance science, and it takes time and a lot of commitment and effort. And then the next topic that this also brings is, well, now that we have the conference going on and we have the papers in, we need to publish it and make it widely accessible. How does this work inside Sigplan? Is everything that Sigplan does open access? Is there anything that is behind a paywall? How does that work for Sigplan?
So let's begin with some of the main Sigplan conferences there. So they are gold open access. We have both gold open access. We have something called Open COC, which gives access to all the papers for free. And more broadly, of course, ACM is also thinking about this, and by 2025, access to the entire digital library will be open for free. And Sigplan's point of view has been that we should make things open for a long time. We don't do it as much for let me call them the other conferences or the smaller conferences that Sigplan has, but for the main conferences where most of the papers are, we have been doing gold open access for a long time. And so
what exactly is golden open? What does that mean?
It, to a first approximation, means that access is free, and that there are no restrictions. So the goal part is that there are absolutely no funny restrictions anywhere. And so particularly in Europe, this is very important, that it's gold open access and not some other form of open access. It has to be like really open. And so ACM has been embracing this for a long time and been working towards opening up the digital library. And that day is getting closer.
Okay, makes a lot of sense. I don't know, because I keep thinking maybe you guys have some deeper insight about this, but it seems like it's somehow a historical debt that we have, in the sense of back in the day when we had to actually format everything and actually print the proceeding, and that has a big cost, because then we need someone to actually format in a printable way. But nowadays is very rare for us to print all of those papers together. I've seen some of those. Like, it's nice to have, like you go to a conference and you get the actual print. It's nice, but in general, we don't do that anymore. So it seems to me that the costs for doing that is a lot lower, and it doesn't quite makes much sense for it to be that closed anymore. So it's it's kind of an incognita for me. Why how some of these things are closed nowadays? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think a lot of this is based on the history of print publication and based on, older financial models where, the publisher would print physical copies and send them out to libraries that subscribe, and the libraries would pay a subscription fee to get those physical copies. So, as we've moved to more paperless publishing, those subscriptions turned into subscriptions to digital libraries. But I think you're raising a good point, and it's a point that I think Sigplan has and its members have been recognizing over the past few years that now that we don't have to print papers on paper, that they should be accessible, right? The knowledge we produce should be accessible to the world, and I think Sigplan has been one of the leaders within ACM, as Jens said, in moving towards open access. I think we may be one of the few societies where all the major publication venues, POPL, PLDI, UPSLA, ICFP, plus TOPLAS now, are all open access. 100% every paper, and it's the version of record in the digital library anyone can go and get. So that's really exciting. I think it's a great accomplishment. But ACM as an organization is trying to move in this direction as well. And there's certainly some organizational challenges. As Jens mentioned, ACM is a large organization. There's a history, and we have an existing library with papers going back, all the way to the original POPL, as Jens said, but even longer in the case of other conferences. So we have all this material, all this knowledge, and the ACM Publications organization is trying to preserve that for posterity. And so they're moving to an open access model. Instead of the new model is called ACM Open, and instead of subscribe to read, as we've had for since the inception of ACM, we have a model where it's subscribed to publish. And so libraries at places like I think both of our universities are subscribers to ACM Open, Carnegie Mellon and the University of California system. And so the university pays a subscription so that all its authors can publish all their papers in gold open access. And so whenever either of us or anyone else who is at an ACM Open institution publishes a paper, whether it's in a fully open access journal or not, that paper that they publish is fully open access. And there's no fee to the authors. It's all covered by the subscription that the library has.
That is awesome. This thing that all the major conferences in Sigplan are open, that's definitely a reason for celebration. I love that. We hope to make progress in that direction too. Now, we're talking about once everything is open access, then you're definitely kind of in a way losing some source of revenue. But this conferences and all of these organizations, they're not free. You need to pay the hotel. You need I don't even know what are all the costs that's probably involved over there, but there is definitely a bunch of costs. Can you talk a little bit about what are the costs that happens at, and what's the source of all this revenue? Where does the money come from?
So when we book hotels for a conference, as we often do, then the thing that the hotel wants the most is that we pay for the food and the drinks. And then in return, they often say, then you can have some meeting rooms for free. That's kind of the target, right? And so it means that when we look at the conference budget, a lot of it is plainly the food and the drinks that are going to be served at the conference. And then, of course, there will be other costs. So Sigplan has a conference manager who helps with the four main conferences and does a lot of work on making those really good. That costs money. We already talked about the gold open access. So Sigplan has a rule that says that if the authors are unable to pay, maybe because they are not at a university that already has signed up to ACM Open, or maybe they just don't have funds to pay for the open access otherwise, Sigplan will pay. So that's another cost. In the old days, of course, we had a cost to host the program committee meeting, but that kind of went away when we went online. And there'll be some other costs as well. So we have to print the program, and we have to sometimes give bags so people can take all the goodies and put them somewhere. So that costs.
Those are very important. Don't take those away.
So once you add all of this up, the typical budget for a Sigplan conference can easily be up in the neighborhood of $400,000. So then people pay registration fee, and then we oftentimes end up making a surplus. And the way Sigplan works is that the conference surplus goes into the common Sigplan account. And then what we spend a lot of that money on is students. So we give it back to students who want to travel to the next conference. And so every year, for the last many years, we give out typically $120,000 a year in money to students to then travel to the next conference. And so as a result, there's a very good number of students at conferences, which I think certainly was true at the Splash in Chicago that you just mentioned.
Yes, and, even more than normal as a percentage.
Even more than normal. Right? Maybe the students are the most excited to get back after COVID. So it's this virtuous cycle where the conferences produce a surplus. A lot of that money goes back to pay for students to go to the next conference, and it just keeps the conferences big and exciting.
I love that. Yeah, especially we were a lot of students. There was one of the labs in my university. We have a lot of students in that particular lab, and I think we're 12 students from TIARC alone, just from them. So there was a lot of Purdue people as well. But yeah, wow. This giving back to students, I love that so much. Actually, I think I got some of those money, I think 2018 when I went to Popple in California. That was a very good popo. So I myself, I'm very glad that this happens, because I wouldn't be able to join a conference otherwise. I was here in Brazil, and I just didn't have the means. Now you also mentioned about the people who publish, and maybe they're not in an institution that has access to the golden standard, and then the Sigplan base for it. Is that a large amount of people who does that, or is it not very?
It's not large anymore. So what has happened over the last few years there is that more and more universities have signed up, and so the expense to Sigplan is not much anymore. And so when you look at the conference budget of 400,000, it's actually a very small part that goes to Gold Open Access nowadays.
Yeah, because I asked this because I think, I don't know, in a way it's kind of unfortunate that, academia in general, programming languages, you need to be inside academia, you need to be inside big institutions to be making good research. And I don't know, for me that's just kind of unfortunate, because come on, we have great minds everywhere. Anyone could be able to do these things, but it's how things are, right?
That it is a reality that that levels of access differ. I think one of our goals as an organization, in ACM and Sigplan, in publications, is to try to level that playing field as much as we can. I don't know that we can ever make it completely flat, but we can keep pushing for it, right? And so I think the push to make ACM all open access over time is part of that. Then no matter where you are, you at least can read all the literature, all the computing literature. And of course, that doesn't solve the publishing problem. But I think initiatives like Sigplan, where Sigplan covers, at least for major conference papers, the costs of open access publishing, they can that can level the playing field in publishing. As we move to open access, I think we need to think more about, what are the remaining barriers? How do we how do we open this up for everyone? One thing is, for people who are not uh, publishing in a fully gold, if people are not publishing in one of those top 4 conferences and want to publish open access, there is a fee right now. And there will be a fee if you're not part of ACM Open in the future. But we need, I think as an organization, we need to figure out, how can we support this transition in ways that are similar to what we're doing with the top 4 conferences right now, but accommodate people in maybe who might be in countries where there isn't as much grant funding for this sort of thing. People who are working in primarily undergraduate institutions where their advisor may not have research money. These people may still be doing great research, and we want to find a way to publish it. And so finding ways of having waivers for these fees and so on, I think will be really important as we make this transition.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Is there any other sort of worries that you guys have in the Sigplan? Like what are some discussions to make things move forward on those senses, make things more open, make things more accessible, like more waivers? Is there any other concerns that you guys have there internally?
I think the main problem that we were working on a couple of years ago was different, and this is what led to double-blind reviewing. And so it's again very much a sort of an equity question of making access to publication flat, as Jonathan was saying, that it's equal access to everyone who has a good idea and a good paper. And a very major goal of double-blind reviewing is to create that.
Can you give us a brief explanation of what's double-blind and how were things before?
In the good old days, when you submit a paper, your name and your co-authors' names will be on the first page. And so it means that a lazy reviewer would be able to look through his or her pile and say, I'm only going to read the papers written by famous people that I know already, and the other ones I'm just going to give them a low grade without reading them much. And so this means that there's whole bunches of papers with good ideas that if that's what the reviewer does, won't get much of a hearing. And so that is a problem. And it's particularly a problem in one dimension that I care deeply about, which is gender diversity. So there, it's just the fact that there's a higher percentage of men than women faculty in the US. And I think it's true for the rest of the world as well. And so it means that the men, that there are just many more famous men than there are famous women, just because there are many more of them. And so this means that if you are the reviewer and you say, I'm just going to only focus on the papers written by famous people, you end up most likely ignoring papers from females. And that's not, so that's just one instance of not fair. And so that was actually one of the clinching arguments for why a lot of the ACM conferences have double-blind reviewing today. And double-blind then means that your name and your co-authors' names are not on the paper, and they are nowhere to be found. And so now nobody will know whether the author is famous or not famous, or male or female. We'll just read the paper for what it says. And so that is much more fair. And I can say for myself that I have had many, many thoughts about double-blind reviewing, arguments for and against. And in the end, the thing that for me was the clinching argument is really this business about gender diversity. That it just became too clear that it's not fair to the females with the way the world is put together today to have single blind reviewing, as we could call it, the old system. And so it's like, okay, we'll take double blind reviewing. I do have my misgivings about it, but it's clear that the advantages are more than the disadvantages. And today, ACM has more than 180 conferences, and Jonathan and I asked them all not so long ago about how they do their reviewing, and almost all of them are doing double blind reviewing, well over 75%.
And it's increasing. It's something that we're encouraging. I think that's a wonderful example. of trying to make the ACM and the publications process more flat and more fair. Another example has been happening in publications deals with naming. So people change their names. For a long time, we've appreciated that sometimes women may change their names when they get married, but also I think there's been more appreciation recently that people who identify as non-binary, people who are trans, might transition from one gender to another and change their name along with that. My child changed their name when they began to identify as non-binary. But if you are a researcher and you've published a paper under your old name and you transition, then that name is your dead name, right? And you don't want to be identified by that name, and you don't want people necessarily to identify you or associate that name with you, because then they might know that you're trans. You might be bullied because of that. It's a sad fact of our world. So we want to protect our authors and of course respect them by calling them by their right names. And I think this has been a challenge, especially in the day of papers printed on dead trees, right? Once you print a name, it's always there. But now that we publish papers electronically, that's not the case. So ACM was actually one of the first societies, and this was fairly recent, 2 or 3 years ago, to commit to changing authors' names in papers after they're published, and setting up a process to do that. I think ACM is actually in the world of publishers, ACM is a pretty lean organization. We don't have a lot of staff. And I think actually initially we had some challenges, and not in the commitment to do that, which was very strong and upfront and early, but in actually making it happen. But we've actually, ACM has reorganized. They've created a separate team specifically for the digital library that reports to the ACM Council. And they've begun making much more progress at making these name changes happen quickly and comprehensively. So not just changing the name on your papers, but any paper in the digital library that cites you, they will go in and edit the paper, the citation, and change it. So that's, I think, really trying to make sure that the record is complete and consistent, and only refers to people by their right names. And that's another thing that I think is really important to equity and in publishing.
I really like that. That sounds like a lot of work. Go through all their citations and change to like minor tweaks.
I heard at a meeting earlier this year that at this point they have it down to typically 4 hours of work. So they have automated a lot, and once the name change is completely understood what it is that needs to be done, 4 hours of work is like a good expectation to have.
Okay. It's a good number. Still quite some time, quite some work, right?
Yeah, certainly figuring out how to do it and make it all happen was a lot of work. And I think, but ACM is doing much better with this now, and I think it's a good thing for our members.
I really like that, and it really warms my heart to hear you guys saying how important it is for being more inclusive in all aspects, because as Jens mentioned, gender inequality in our field is just excruciating. Sometimes I open the numbers for this podcast, and like 1% of the listeners are women. I'm like, wow, this is it's just you cannot argue with this. Just our field is just so outweighed, and I don't know. It's even hard for us to say anything about it. Like, it's not really our place to but we can be open and try to do our best to be more as inclusive as possible. Is there any other things that happens for more inclusion? Those sort of things. I know PMLW, PLMW, for example, does a lot of of work to welcome new students and to make sure that people understand what our field is about. Like, I don't know, I feel like the most important part of our field, as we've been talking again and again throughout this conversation we're having, is not even the publication, it's not even the conferences, it's people. Like, it's meeting one another, is being part of this group that we are. And I just love PLMW, for example, because of this. Like, it's just giving this opportunity for people to come here and meet each other and be like, okay, this is what we do, this is what all of this is about.
Let me give an example from Sigplan. So one of the primary functions of the vice chair of Sigplan is to be the main person reading suggestions for program committees for conferences. And oftentimes the comment that the vice chair will send back is, you need more females on the program committee. Sometimes they will say you need more people from South America or from Australia or some other place. But oftentimes the main comment that comes back is, you need more females. And it's in many ways it's very simple. We cannot go around and underrepresent females on our committees. We need to give them the representation that at least the proportion of females in the field is, and maybe even more, because we want to boost the number of females who get their papers accepted and so on. And so it starts at the top. We try to see to that females on the executive committee, that there's just pay attention to genders at every level.
I think that's super important. And when I ran the UPSLA, when I was the chair of the UPSLA program committee in 2015, I recruited a PC that was 50% women. And
Wow.
I think one of the challenges is, of course, there aren't that many women in our field. There aren't the proportion is not anywhere close to 50%. But actually, we have a very broad community, right? Many researchers, and sometimes if you're not careful, the same people will get invited to the PC over and over, right? And so I think one of the secrets, and that I certainly used, and I think other PCs have used, is to try to broaden that pool, right? Look at all the people who've published in Sigplan conferences. I got some great data that was collected on people who have published through by previous conference chairs, and I used that to find authors who were really well qualified, but maybe hadn't served on a PC, right? So I didn't have to ask the same people who have maybe already been doing a lot of work, right? Because the other thing that can happen with any underrepresented group is that they can sometimes be asked to do too much work. But if you find people who maybe haven't served, it's an opportunity for them to, be on a major PC that they haven't been on before. And so I think if we can look for those synergies, we can really expand the field. And I love, what's been happening with PLMW, as you mentioned. It's a thing that brings more students from all parts of the world, from all different demographics, into Sigplan conferences. I know Sigplan pays for people to come who are going to PLMW, then they get to meet some of the prominent people in the field and hear about kind of get oriented into the research community, hear about advice on how to do good research or career paths. It's really been a great thing in making Sigplan more diverse. I think another activity I would highlight is the programming language mentoring organization that Talia Ringer and others have been setting up. I've participated as a mentor to several people through that program. I meet with them once a month, and they get advice from, maybe they have an advisor at their university, but they can get advice from someone who's outside their university, or maybe they haven't started research yet. Maybe there's not an opportunity at their institution, so they can get advice from someone who's at a different place. So that's been another way that we've tried to kind of equalize and give people opportunities wherever they might be.
I love that. That is great. Yeah, that's definitely a. Is it part of the Sigplan, or I think she does this completely on her own, right?
It is part of Sigplan in the sense that Sigplan, I think, supports it and integrates it into their conferences. But she's doing the legwork, and she and other volunteers are doing the legwork, and I think that's true for a lot of things that happen in Sigplan. Someone has a great idea, and UPLMW happened this way, right? It was a few faculty who had really wanted to help new people get into our field and make the field more diverse. So they created this institution, and it's now something that happens at every conference and has been sort of passed on to more and more volunteers.
I like that so much, because like when we're just outside, I consider me kind of an outsider watching what's going on in all these conferences and all these venues and all these things happening, and it seems like everything is just so well behaved already. Like everything's already set, everything's already decided in a way that seems like it's done. Like it's done, but it's not. It's not. It's everything is communitary. Everything you sit down and you talk with your friends, you talk with each other, with the professors, and it's still being decided. Like what should we be doing, and we are all interested together in providing them the best of what we can achieve in our field, in the conferences, in the papers, in the work we do, and welcoming new people. We just want to do research, do science, do programming languages, what we all care and love, right? And I really like that. I'm really happy that we're having this conversation and making these ideas more broad and more clear, right? Like for everyone to be able to see things how they are, and anyone who is a programming languages researcher can take part, can come over and volunteer, and we all have our voices in a way, right? Some voices are a little more respected because have been around for longer, right? And that makes sense. That's how the world works. But that doesn't mean that you guys don't listen, right? that things cannot move, cannot change, cannot get better. And I really appreciate that. You guys have been awesome. I really appreciate all the works that everyone has been doing. It's a lot of work. It's very hard work. Before we wrap things up, one last thing that we didn't touch at is in the topic of hybrid conferences. What are the so we're coming out of this pandemic world where everything was completely virtual. We were all trapped in our homes, and we had no idea when things would come back online. And now that we're starting to come back online, there is a lot of conversation of should we come online completely, or rather should we come in person completely as it was before. But then there's also this question of accessibility, of welcoming people that cannot travel, and then there's also these questions of pollution, right? And what are the thoughts? What are the discussions happening about? What is the overall sentiment on hybrid conferences?
So I think hybrid is. I'll give my opinion. I think hybrid is here to stay. We've learned how to do a lot of work virtually that we did physically before the pandemic. So I think we'll continue to do that. But I think people also like to be in person. They like to have that in-person connection, talking with people in the hallway, making those connections. And so I think hybrid is the right way to go. I think we're still figuring out how to do it. We've done at Splash, for example, we had mirrored sessions. So we held a session in Chicago at the normal time, and then we did the same session 8 hours later, and we played videos of people giving their talks. But the authors came to that later session if they could, Generally, all the sessions were in waking hours in Chicago. So if you were in person in Chicago, then you would easily be able to attend both sessions. That was something in our post-conference survey. The hybrid sessions, the mirrored sessions, were really appreciated by some of our remote attendees. But it's also true that the attendance wasn't very high on them. Sometimes authors didn't get very many questions or have much discussion with attendees, virtual attendees in those sessions. So I think we need to figure out how to balance kind of the issue of making things accessible, through things like recording talks and making them available online, through maybe holding activities in different time zones or different hours, but also having kind of a critical mass of participation, right? I like one of the stories we told in our retrospective on Splash 2021. I think some of the most successful hybrid events were when there was a smaller event, so it was more discussion oriented, and there was a critical mass of people in person, but also online, right? And this created a dynamic where you didn't feel like you were alone in the room at the conference or alone online. There were people who were like you either way, but there was also the opportunity for discussion. So at one workshop, Hatra, I participated in, we had paper presentations. Some were online over Zoom, some were in person. We kind of, either way, we mirrored the presentation of the other people. There were discussions, and we had breakout groups. When we had a breakout group, typically it was, some breakout groups were all online and some were all in person. But then when we reported back to the whole group, each breakout group kind of talked to the whole audience of everyone online and in person. And so it was a way of working, I think, in a natural way where everyone felt included and everyone felt they were a part of things, but yet some people were remote and some were in person. So that worked really well. We need to find more ways of kind of incorporating remote participants with local participants and creating communities and discussion and interaction, which is what really people go to conferences for, right? We can read the papers in journals, but we go to conferences to talk to people. And how do we make that work?
And eat that food that is very expensive. Make sure that we have food there.
That's right. Food brings people together. It's true.
We have a saying where I'm from is that if you put some, well, I think everywhere has the same. But if you put some food in a room, you get grad students. That's given.
It's good.
Well, that was amazing. It was a very, very insightful conversation. Is there anything that we didn't mention, that we didn't talk, that you guys would like to think that would be interesting to bring up? We still have time if you want. Any questions that you think that I didn't do and I definitely should have poked on some harder questions? No? All right. Well, thank you so much for coming here. Thank you so much for coming over and donating some of your time. I know that you guys are very busy. You guys are part of big institutions. So we are very, very glad that we had this opportunity to be here today and listen about everything related to the Sigplan and the ACM. I definitely understand much, much better how things are happening in there. I think I have a fair understanding of at least where should I go to if I want to learn something, or who should I talk with, right? And it was a very enlightening conversation. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you again for inviting.
Yes, it was delightful to talk about these issues. I think they're close to all of our hearts, and we're here because we want to make ACM and the community of programming languages a better place.
Definitely.
Oh, I hope you guys enjoyed the show as much as I did recording it. It's always so nice to be talking with these amazing people, Jens at UCLA and Jonathan at CMU. Amazing institution. Sometimes I think, oh my god, what am I doing? I'm a little nobody, came out of nowhere, Brazil, and I'm talking with these amazing people. I am so grateful of our community. People in our community are just so humble and so accessible. I love it. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Jens, for being here. If you guys are liking this show, I would like to ask your support. I have created a link on Ko-Fi so that you can donate. Any amount would be greatly appreciated. I have some of you, I think I mentioned this in the last episode, I have frozen my PhD this semester and the next semester to be with my family in Brazil, so I'm basically living out of my savings. So if you like this show and would like to keep seeing it running, please consider donating any amount. We have 2 options to give whatever amount you can give there, have recurring options. So I would deeply, greatly appreciate from the bottom of my heart if you guys could do it. Ko-fi-typetheoryforall.com. You see a link in our website, typetheoryforall.com. Leave any comments that you have to Jonathan and Jens over there as well. We also have an email if you guys prefer talking more anonymously over there. We have Twitter. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at TT4All. You also find Jonathan's Twitter in the links of the show. I think that's what I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for being here. See you guys next time.